Good afternoon. I hope everybody is doing well, that you're staying safe and healthy. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the new and improved World Languages Week. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to CULTR's 6th annual World Languages Week. As many of you know, this event is normally a one-day event held here at Georgia State in Atlanta, Georgia. But in light of the COVID pandemic, we decided to expand this event to a week-long virtual format, enabling us to expand our reach and promote the value of language studies and cultural competence to even more students here in Georgia and throughout the country. Located at Georgia State University, an urban minority serving Title III and Title V research university in the heart of Atlanta, the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research, CULTR, CULTR, is the first LRC in the Southeastern United States. CULTR's mission is to advocate for global skills opportunities, especially for underrepresented students. CULTR's slogan, Languages for All, underscores the center's commitment to providing access to fulfilling language programs for learners and meaningful professional development for educators. To this end, the center has created a unique identity around serving the needs of all students in the communities they represent by helping to provide empowering language opportunities as part of the 21st century global education. CULTR is guided by its core values of access, advocacy, outreach, and research, and has gained a national reputation for innovative approaches to promoting access to language education for all students, regardless of their socioeconomic and ethnic background. So before we go any farther, I would really like to thank the people who have really made this, who have contributed their time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears to making this possible. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors, which include the Office of International Initiatives here at Georgia State, CYBER, the Center for International Business, Education, and Research, another Title VI center here at Georgia State, and the Atlanta Global Studies Center, a consortium between Georgia State and Georgia Tech, also a Title VI center. These valuable long-term partners help us to contribute to this important work. I'd also like to thank the moderators and the panelists who are graciously giving their time this week to share with you their insights about the impact of language proficiency and cultural competence on their lives and their careers. Thank you also to the tireless Patrick Wallace in the Georgia Department of Education, and to all the fabulous World Language District coordinators out there here in Georgia and throughout the nation who have helped spread the word about this event. Finally, I want to express my deep appreciation to all of the teachers and students and their parents and all others who are tuning in around the country. This afternoon at 2 p.m., we'll welcome Paulina Guzman from the Mayor's Office for International Affairs to moderate the diplomacy panel, where you will hear from Consuls General of Costa Rica, Japan, and Switzerland. On Tuesday at noon, we hope you'll join us for the Intercultural Competence panel with Dr. Murad Dakhli, Professor of International Business here at Georgia State University. The panelists include Yoshi Domoto from the Japan America Society, Laverne Perry from Georgia State's Rialto Center for the Arts, and Hélène Touré from YER. That afternoon at 2, Diana Wren-Rapp from the Atlanta Global Studies Center will moderate the Foreign Language Area Studies, or FLAS, student panel. You'll hear from 4 students who received that scholarship, and they will talk about their language studies abroad. On Wednesday at noon, I have the pleasure of moderating the National Security Panel with Monica Alvarez from the FBI and Mona Postlethwaite from the National Security Agency, or NSA. Wednesday afternoon at 2, we will welcome Dr. Laura Boudon, Director of the Study Abroad programs here at Georgia State in the Office of Study Abroad, and she will speak with students and young professionals about their experiences studying languages abroad. Thursday's lineup includes IT and Global Business panel moderated by Global Atlanta's Trevor Williams. Panelists include Erica Bolden from Mercedes-Benz USA, Christina Hoferle from the Cultural Mastery, Steuven Krubener from Conversify, and Jennifer Peacock from Zwick Roll. At 2, on that day, you'll hear insights from GSU alumni about how GSU provides resources for their careers and how they have leveraged networking opportunities and navigated entering the job market. This panel will be moderated by Tim Yansa of World Languages and Cultures and the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research. On the final day of World Languages Week, we will have a noonday panel focusing on the humanitarian and public health sectors. It will be moderated by Dr. Monica Swan from the Department of Population Health Sciences here at GSU, and will feature panelists from CARE, the Carter Center, and the Peace Corps, as well as a global health and cross-cultural communication workforce development consultant from Ubuntu Speaks. We'll close out World Languages Week with a panel at 2 p.m. on Friday, highlighting the work and experiences of Peace Corps employees. Si vous parlez français, il faut assister parce que ce panel sera en français exclusivement, más o menos. My language is Spanish, but if you understood my really terrible French, you should tune in on Friday, because this panel, to conclude World Languages Week, will be exclusively in French. It is made possible through a partnership with the French Consulate in Atlanta and the cultural services of the French Embassy. Special thanks to Annalise Gallier for making that happen. I hope you will enjoy many, if not all, of the sessions this week. Now, as with everything in 2020, nothing happens according to plan. Unfortunately, our keynote speaker, who is going to talk about global mindset as a necessary skill set for success in life and careers, is unable to join us today. She's had a last-minute emergency and has had to cancel. However, I do want to make this an interactive session. And so what I'm willing to do is entertain questions about kind of what our focus is here, what your interests are regarding global mindset and careers, what sectors are you thinking about? So students who are thinking about possible career paths and would like to ask questions about how language and culture fit into that, feel free to write in the Q&A, and I can entertain questions, and we can go from there. I apologize. I was really looking forward to this talk. So one question that has come in: if we are unable to attend a live panel discussion, are they being recorded in order to watch later? Yes, they are being recorded and will be available on the Culture website after World Languages Week, and we've had time to do whatever needs to be done to make them ready to upload. And so you will all receive email letting you know when that's available. So another question is, does GSU have international job listings through the Career Center? So we work pretty exclusively with the Career Center, and I do believe that they do have international job listings. I am happy to coordinate with them, and if you want to follow up with me through email, feel free to do so. Will the FBI and NSA talk about specific roles those agencies to get us past the stereotypes we know from TV? Yes, that is actually one of the questions I will be asking them. Is it as exciting as it looks on TV? And you may be surprised by their answer. So we've already discussed kind of what that information may look like. So will today's speaker give her talk later in the week? We are discussing with her the possibility of rescheduling. If we can program it for another day this week, we will let you know as soon as possible. Another possibility that we're exploring is possibly recording her talk and providing you with access to the recording. What are some tips for choosing a career path that fits your interest in studying world languages? Courses to choose in college, outside of school, resources, etc. So, and that comes from Maya Crowell. So Maya, um, here's my answer to that is, you should choose a career pathway that calls to you. You should think of what it is that you love to do and pursue that. And I can guarantee you that the study of languages and the study of cultures will um, fit into that in some way or another. It's in so whether you go into business or finance, or whether you go into hospitality, whether you go into national security, whatever the career pathway you are interested in, the skills you acquire through the study of languages and cultures will make you all even better at that job, and will give you a wide-ranging skill set that will make you successful. For example, and I'll give you an example. I speak with a number of our alumni, and one last week works for UPS, and she told me that she was originally hired to work in global logistics, which makes sense. You can see how languages and cultures would fit in with that because it's global. But then she was moved to a different section of UPS where she does IT training. And so she said, well, I don't have a background in IT. They've kind of trained me with that background. But the training itself, the skills she acquired by studying languages, and she was a French literature major. So she said, learning about other cultures, studying languages, learning about people makes her an excellent trainer because she understands when communication breaks down. She understands what the needs of the listener or the learner are, right? And so she's able to feel a certain level of empathy for the people she's trying to train. And if they're struggling and having a hard time understanding, she can bridge that communication gap. So I can go on and give you plenty of other examples. We have alumni who work for NCR, who work for Delta, and they say the value of their language and cultural experience is that empathy for diversity, being able to work well on a team. These are really, really important skills, no matter what career path you follow. Are some languages, so Donna Skelsey is asking, are some languages more valued than others? That's a good question. I think if you have, I don't know that I would use the term valued. Some are more critical to certain career pathways. And this is another thing that I think you'll hear throughout the week is, with say national security, there's some very specific critical languages such as Chinese or Korean or Arabic, and now Russian is one that I think you'll hear mentioned in that particular panel. But so you may hear, okay, these specific languages are prioritized, but often when students have a language background, especially if they've studied abroad, that draws the attention. And Michelle, one of the things that she was going to talk about was the year she spent in Malaga, Spain, and she's never done an internship. She hasn't had anything like that. When she goes to a job interview and they see she spent a year abroad, that stops all questions and they hone in on that and they want to know all about that. And often people that are interviewing her will say, oh, I always wanted to study abroad. I never had the chance, or life got in the way or whatever. So now is the time to be thinking about how you can program that into your college experience. I myself started undergraduate as a pre-med major. And when I went to talk with an associate dean about how I could balance pre-med with doing a study abroad, because I knew I wanted to go abroad to Mexico for a year, they said, well, you can't do those two things. The coursework is too demanding for pre-med, you can't do study abroad. And that for me was an unacceptable answer. And so I just said, well, then I'm gonna drop pre-med because study abroad for me is a priority. So I think, Donna, that it just depends on what your career interests are. And often the benefits are not specifically tied to the language you study, but rather kind of broader and more intangible. And there's things that come with the study of languages that you can't really see or measure, but they give you this kind of wider understanding of people and the world. So another question for students enrolled in language programs and want to make a career out of their language majors, could you share some insights? What would be some of the opportunities and or challenges? I think one of the challenges, I like to start with challenges first, so we can get over them and think about the challenges as opportunities. But one of the challenges is we often get locked into a pathway that we think it has to be this. And one of the things I think you'll find in the alumni panel is each of them started on a specific pathway that they thought was what they were supposed to do with languages, and now they have ended up doing something completely different that was unexpected, but is logical and makes sense and fits with their appreciation of languages and cultures. So I think another of the challenges is often faculty at universities are also stuck in a very kind of specific mindset of what a language student looks like, what they are going to do, why they're interested in the language. And here at Georgia State, the more we've talked with with students from all backgrounds and all majors and all disciplines, it's very clear that the pathway that often professors think is the right pathway are vastly different. And so you may get some pushback from advisors or even professors about, well, no, that doesn't really fit with language study. You need to think of something else. And I would tell you to stick to your guns and do what you find passion in. And now the opportunities are kind of limitless. You don't know what could happen. I've known students who have studied languages and now live abroad in Asia, teaching English or working in other kind of capacities. It's one of the beautiful things about studying a language, meeting people, traveling abroad. You don't know what the opportunities are until you go there, right? So when you meet people and start making those connections, all of a sudden doors just start opening up. So there are many students from high school registered and participating. These students are very committed to the study of languages and cultures. Please greet them and congratulate them. We're listening from Savannah, Georgia. So greetings to all of my friends in Savannah. I hope you are well and welcome. I'm so happy that you're able to join us today. So somebody writes, as a senior citizen of age 55, I would like to know if there is a community meet in Atlanta that will help me with speaking the Spanish language. So there's maybe two places that I would point you to for Spanish specifically. One is through the Latin American Association. Often they have events and activities to help the study of Spanish, as well as kind of teaching people like English language learners teaching English. So I would point you to the Latin American Association. Another possibility is you could enroll in classes here at Georgia State or other universities where you're able to take classes as a non-degree seeking student. That's definitely a possibility. Some universities have what they call continuing education. So these are classes that you could pay for and take and participate in with receiving a grade, but not necessarily tied to a degree. So those are a couple of options. I would also look on the website Meetup. I know there are conversation groups for French and for other languages, and so I would assume that for Spanish there's probably a number of possibilities there. So somebody asking about the TEFL and the TESOL programs here at GSU, and how is the current global pandemic affecting the translation field? So the TEFL and TESOL are actually housed in the Department of Applied Linguistics and English as a Second Language. They're not in our department. However, we have forged a close collaboration with Applied Linguistics through their intensive English program. And so the students who are pursuing the TESOL and the TEFL the degrees or certificates will often are coming from different parts of the world, and we'll meet with students who are studying languages, and we try to foster those kind of cross-cultural connections. And now, with the question of the global pandemic affecting the translation field, I think it's too early to tell kind of how the pandemic is affecting the translation field. But if you've kind of watched in the news over the last 7 months, what you've seen is places where the disconnect, places where there's been a disconnection between, say, public health initiatives and kind of language interpreters or translators, that the pandemic has been worse there, right? And so, but areas where public health initiatives are combined with efforts to communicate to immigrant communities in their languages to transmit information that's understandable and reaches a wider audience, you've seen those steps have been really successful. However, there is a tremendous need for interpreters, especially right now, and it's created a lot of problems in getting the pandemic under control, that we don't have healthcare workers who are able to either speak another language or communicate interculturally. So it's really brought into the spotlight some of these deficiencies within the healthcare system of addressing the needs of non-English speaking communities and immigrant communities. I mean, that's a great question. So can we use this to learn languages? I'm not sure what the question is referring to, but what you're going to hear this week is a focus on languages, but languages as a piece of a larger puzzle, a larger kind of intercultural competence puzzle. So language is one piece, and often students and others will get stuck on language, but language doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's really important to understand the intercultural kind of piece of things. So how does the cultural context connect with languages, right? And when we talk about cultural competence, it's much deeper than knowing how to say hello or knowing how to greet somebody or how to hand them a business card. We're talking about, when we talk about cultural competence, we're talking about understanding the deep structures, kind of history, politics, religion, ideas about aging, ideas about healthcare, ideas about sexuality. I mean, you name it, language is intertwined with all of that, as well as questions of power and access and who belongs and who doesn't belong. Language is at the heart of all of that. You know, I mean, you go back, if you think, for those who study Spanish or study history, you think of colonialism, you know, one of the first things conquerors, los conquistadores, would do is plant the flag and make a statement, an official statement, describing how they are claiming this land in the name of so-and-so, you know, ruler, and for the glory of Spain or what have you. So, you know, language to demonstrate ownership, to demonstrate power, to demonstrate belonging has always been, as long as we've moved from guttural utterances to actually articulating thoughts with words. Another question is it beneficial to have lived abroad as studying a specific topic abroad? I was born in a different country and lived there for 10 years. Yeah, I think, you know, both, it's not an either or. There's both have very crucial kind of roles to play in how you tell your story. So at the end of this week, what I'm hoping that the attendees will understand is, you know, what we're trying to help students envision is how they tell their language study cultural competence story. So when you're thinking about, we often kind of also get stuck on careers, but when you're talking about careers, or you're talking about the story you tell yourself about your life's trajectory and who you are, what you value, what your identity is, how do these things, how do these various steps along the journey kind of come together to build who you are and the story you tell about yourself? So absolutely, this is Gabriel Bastos. It is beneficial to have lived abroad. And I think you want to think what are the things you know and think and learn about yourself that have come out of that experience? I would also advocate that you study abroad, because one of the benefits of study abroad is you kind of separate yourself from what you know, and you begin to question different values and different forms of kind of understanding the world and the stories that we tell through culture about that make the world intelligible and understandable. And you see things from a different point of view. So you need that kind of contrast and that choque in Spanish, if you will, that kind of culture shock, right? It's necessary for you to be able to step outside yourself and really, separate yourself from yourself and think really clearly about who you are. So I'm also being told from the managing director of culture to remind you that the Critical Language Scholarship Program webinar starts at 1 p.m. Eastern, and there is a different registration for that. So you can find that on the Georgia State of the Culture website. I'm interested in finding summer internship abroad. Do you have any advice for finding opportunities, especially in Germany or China? And that's from Hannah. So Hannah, I would tell you to kind of look at, right now things are really up in the air for obvious reasons, but talk with your Office of International Initiatives or the language department kind of where you study. So they will have kind of ideas about summer internships abroad. Last summer, everything was put on hold. Right now, there's some kind of steps toward preparing for a possible summer of study abroad. But right now, I'm not terribly confident that this summer things will move forward. So another question, what is the difference between speaking multiple languages and communicating interculturally? So, that's an excellent question. It kind of drives to the heart of what I was mentioning earlier, where you could speak multiple languages and pronounce them well or poorly, as I did with French, and not know anything about the cultural context or the people who speak those languages. Again, language doesn't happen in a vacuum. Language happens in cultural contexts where people kind of express ideas that are part of their identity. And so, communicating interculturally is, I would say, recognizing differences and not shying away from them, but respecting them, and not tolerating them, but actually embracing those differences to learn from each other. At the end of the day, being interculturally competent is to be interdependent, not dependent, not independent, interdependent, where we see each other as complementary, that one is not better than the other, that we all are on the same team, and that we all can learn from each other. And that's really kind of at the heart for me of kind of communicating interculturally. Another person asked to define global competency. What kind of skills are represented within that definition? So there's a lot to say about cultural competence. There's different people express it, kind of define it different ways. But what you'll see, I think, what you'll see is there's a sense of understanding of self and other. There's language for sure. There's understanding history and society more broadly. So those are all kind of pieces of global competence. There is, through the Department of Education, a really nice one-page info like what do you call those? Like a informational graphic that kind of lays it out. And what we can do is send that out to everybody and put it on our website, or put it, where it's accessible. And it gives a really good overview of how they define global competence. But there's different organizations that define it different ways, and you'll see there's a lot of overlap when it comes to some of the definitions. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of advocacy for global languages / opportunities for underrepresented and underserved students? So that's an excellent question. I appreciate that. So here's my feeling. When I talk with students, especially here at Georgia State, and when I'm talking with people in the business community, administrators here at Georgia State, for me, at the end of the day, language learning and teaching students about culture is a social justice issue. For me, the doors and opportunities that it opens need to open for all students, right? So if you're at a school that is in the kind of wealthiest part of town and they have multiple languages, and and students are participating in study abroad in high school, well, those are great opportunities. But what about the students at other parts of town? Don't they also deserve to have those same opportunities? And so, but maybe the school doesn't have as great a budget, and the teachers are overworked and underpaid and don't have time to develop study abroad opportunities. And so for those students, I find it's especially important, because if we think of the university as a vehicle for social mobility, and we know that that is still true, we've seen that especially here at Georgia State, then for me, the focus on languages, the study of languages, the study of culture is a key component within a global marketplace, a global economy. It's a key component to enhance and to really catalyze that social mobility of students by having those opportunities. Mary Jackson asks if there's an age limit to study abroad. There's not. I know of high schools that have done study abroad, and I know of students in middle school who have done study abroad. There's no upper age limit either. I'm not sure if the age limit question is if one is too young or too old, but you're never too old to travel. You're never too young to benefit from learning about other people. And depending on where you are in the country, there may be opportunities to interact interculturally within your hometown. So there's a lot of cultures in the United States, and there's a lot of ways that you can interact with those cultures. And I encourage you to seek those opportunities out. So how much do universities value an applicant's multicultural and bilingual background in their evaluation of this student's application? That's an excellent question. And I'm not in the admissions office, so anything I say is pure guessing and conjecture. However, from my interactions and my experience with the admissions officers, they're looking for, again, we're talking about storytelling. They're looking for what makes you unique, what makes you you, right? And unique, not in the sense of like, oh, I've done all these extracurricular activities, I'm so special, and I'm right. So, but what makes you you? How did those experiences come together, and you are more than the sum of your parts? You're more than the sum of your experiences. How do these things influence how you view the world, how you interact with others, and how you hope to impact the world, right? So it's, you know, it's more than just checking off boxes on an application. It's also, it's more, how do all of these things coalesce to make you you? I'm a first year freshman. Can I do study abroad? If you are a first year freshman, you can do study abroad. If you talk with the study abroad office, that's what I would say. Go talk with them. There are programs that are open now if you're at Georgia State or elsewhere. I mean, all these programs are all open. They're taking applications. Many of the deadlines for summer study abroad are in February. So I would say, think about where you want to go and go there and go talk with your study abroad advisors and see not only what the deadlines are, but what scholarships are available, what money is out there. Michelle, for example, had received a Gilman scholarship, which is a really competitive scholarship. And that year in Malaga, she paid nothing for, but through really being strategic about scholarships and planning her money well and working with study abroad advisors, she was able to stay for a full year and really have an incredible experience. And Christy has reminded me that it's infographic was the word I was looking for earlier. So another question, how do you recommend students pursue language and global competency while traveling abroad is out of the question? What kinds of resources and activities would you recommend? So one thing I would recommend if you're here at Georgia State, there are currently initiatives being developed for virtual study abroad experiences and virtual exchanges. So in classes, through kind of faculty initiatives, and Dr. Dockley can talk about that maybe a little bit as well. There's certain faculty who have developed ways of connecting students with people, scholars, students, artists abroad, you know, through their classes or through kind of extracurricular activities. So that's one way to look for those kind of experiences in developing global competence. But yeah, right now we're kind of limited in what we can do. If you want to pursue language ability, at Georgia State, through the Circle, which is essentially our language lab, we have connected to an online platform that pairs students with conversation partners, so you can maintain your oral communication skills. So another question that is here, many jobs that require or prefer language skills tend to want candidates to quantify their language ability. Fluent, proficient, elementary. Do you have any advice for job candidates who don't exactly know how to describe their own language ability? That's a great question. And if for those of you who are studying languages, you know there's this proficiency scale through the American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages, right? And so it goes from novice to intermediate to superior and advanced and superior. And so one way that you can kind of measure your proficiency level, and you know, this person mentions the word fluent. So let's talk more about your level of proficiency. I try to encourage students not to be too hard on themselves because they don't consider themselves fluent. Let's all be kind to ourselves and just realize we're on this journey, and with each semester, with each trip, with each conversation, with each day, we're improving and moving up the proficiency scale, right? So one way to quantify that, what your proficiency is to, and we can also put a link to this on the website or send this out, but through ACTFL, there is a way that you can self-assess. ACTFL has developed the World Readiness Standards, and they have a way in which you can look at a series of can-do statements and measure what your language ability is. And a can-do statement is basically, what can you do, right? Can you ask a question? Can you answer a question about X, Y, or Z, right? And so you go through these very specific questions about can-do statements, and how you answer then comes out at the end with a kind of rough estimate of what your proficiency level is. Now, for a more accurate description, you would need to do an oral proficiency interview. There's different tests and things like that. But the kind of self-assessment would give you a basic understanding. And I've done that in some of my classes where I've asked students to start off with the self-assessment, and often they are harder on themselves than they need to be, and their proficiency is high, like I rate them higher than they rate themselves, and that, I think that's pretty typical for us human beings. We tend to be pretty hard on ourselves. So another question is, can you share the link to the site where people can practice oral communication skills? I can track that down and share that with you. And I think maybe Trish in the circle, if she's listening, can share that information. Another question is, what do I think about language learning apps? So the language learning apps, so we're talking about things like Rosetta Stone or Mango or things like that. I think they're great. Duolingo, like I need to reinstall Duolingo and practice my French some more. But I think these are great complements. They supplement your language learning, but there's nothing that will take the place of learning a language with other students in a classroom. You need that back and forth. Again, language doesn't happen in isolation, doesn't happen in a vacuum. Language learning does not happen in a vacuum. And the key component is learn the language and go abroad. The language learning apps may give you some of the basic building blocks that you need, but until you actually take those blocks and try and build something, your level of proficiency is going to be pretty low, right? And we're also not even addressing the intercultural piece. You need to use the language and use it in a cultural context. And again, it could be abroad, or it could also be here in the United States. There are opportunities to really, especially here in Georgia, there's areas where there are tremendous numbers of Francophone speakers. There's Korean speakers, Spanish speakers. And so, it is, the opportunities are all around us. Now, I guess the other question that person is asking, the kind of hidden question is, what about Google Translate? What about these kind of these apps for translating? I believe now, like with Google, you can point at a sign and it will translate right through the image, and which is fine. That may be like when you're in survival mode, that could be very useful. However, for example, with students who have submitted papers to me, and I can tell, this is just an FYI, heads up to all students. We know when you've used a translation, or when you've had your best friend who speaks Spanish or French or whatever, had asked them to help you write your paper. Because all of a sudden, on the one hand, with translation applications, the language becomes nonsensical because it's translating words, it's not translating context. And so one of the important things that I mentioned about translation apps is the translation apps cannot translate metaphor, they cannot translate sarcasm, they cannot translate double meanings, right? So there's a car, a commercial for a car, and I don't even remember if it's for CarMax or for something, where there's two different scenarios. Somebody comes out of their house and they see a car, they say, "Oh no, or oh my God, or something, but it's bad. Like something has happened to their car, and then it cuts to somebody else who comes out and says the exact same thing, and but it's good, right? They're really happy. And so the emotions behind language are things that translation apps are not able to capture, right? So keep that in mind. Like only, and at the end of the day, any kind of translation that is done through machine translation, it needs a human eye to verify that the translation is accurate. You look at the Globalization and Localization Association, and they will tell you, like, at the end of the day, you need human beings who will tell you if the translation is good or no bueno, right? So how important are having language skills to study abroad experience? Is it still valuable to study abroad if you don't know the language? And this is something, we've seen in recent years, is this desire to quantify kind of study abroad of outgoing students, incoming students. You've seen a kind of recently you've seen a big development of study abroad experiences in English, and this is fine, and it gets students abroad, but really without the language piece, you're missing a big chunk, because then you're kind of like, and recently my daughter, who's 13, she's recently discovered The Amazing Race. And unless you really truly know the history and the culture and the language, you're basically walking through culture, you're walking through a country, and you're not really integrating and learning about that culture. So, I would say it's really important not to miss the language piece. Okay, I don't see any other questions. I think, it's 12:52. The next session will start at 1. All recorded sessions will be available on the CULTR website at the World Languages Week page. And I'm trying to catch up with some of the other questions. Okay, I don't see anything else. So if anybody has any last minute questions, okay, there's the link. So the students asked me about my favorite pun. So it's in Spanish. Where do cats go when they die? Purgatory. ¿A dónde van los gatos? Purgatorio. That, Brittany, that's very, very good. I like that. I'm not going to try and match your puns. But if we're going to talk about cats, there is another, it's not a pun, it's more of a riddle in Spanish, that is, ¿qué animal es dos veces animal? What animal is 2 times an animal? And the answer is a cat, un gato, porque es gato y araña. So araña is spider in Spanish, but arañar, the verb arañar, is to scratch. So it's a cat and it scratches, or it is a cat and a spider. So I love riddles more than puns. Okay, thank you, Giovanna. And thank you all for attending. We will work with Michelle to try and record her talk and provide you all access to the recording. I really enjoyed your comments, your questions, and I look forward to seeing you all this week and in some of the other sessions.